The cobblestone street in the tiny Italian village of Monteverde glittered under a late afternoon sun, its golden rays catching the dust kicked up by the tires of a retreating rental car. I stood there, motionless, my breath caught mid-argument, as the taillights of that Fiat shrank into the distance. My husband Daniel had slammed the driver's door shut with a laugh that sliced through the warm air like a blade. "Let's see how she manages now," he'd shouted, his voice thick with wine and venom, echoed by the drunken chuckles of his college buddies Rick, Tom, and Julian sprawled across the back seat. The car swerved around a bend, leaving me stranded in a place whose name I could barely pronounce, my purse dangling from my shoulder, my heart pounding with disbelief. It had started as a petty spat outside a cafe, the kind of argument every couple has on vacation when exhaustion and too much Chianti collide. I'd begged Daniel to ease up on the drinking, it was barely noon, and his slurred words were already drawing stares from the locals sipping espresso at nearby tables. "You're embarrassing me," I'd hissed, tugging at his arm as he swayed. His friends, those overgrown frat boys celebrating their annual reunion, had goaded him on. "She's always gotta control you, huh, Dan?" Rick had sneered, slapping another glass of red onto the table. When I stood to leave, Daniel followed me outside, his temper flaring with every step. The fight escalated fast, years of unspoken grievances erupting in the open air. "You think you're so perfect, Laura? Always nagging, always better than me," he'd roared, his face inches from mine. I'd snapped back. "Maybe if you acted like a husband instead of a child, I wouldn't have to." Then came the moment that changed everything. "Your purse has your passport, right?" he'd said, his voice dripping with mockery as he climbed into the car. "Figure it out then. You're so damn smart." The engine roared to life and they were gone, their laughter fading into the hum of the countryside. I stood frozen, my mouth still open mid-sentence. "Daniel, wait," as the reality of his betrayal sank in. "He's coming back," I told myself, clutching my purse tighter. "This is just a scare tactic, a cruel joke to punish me." But the minutes stretched into an hour, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows over the unfamiliar streets. The knot in my stomach tightened. Locals glanced at me curiously, some with pity, others with mild annoyance as they finished their meals and drifted home. Night fell, and the charming village that had seemed so postcard perfect by day turned menacing in the dark. I counted my cash. €75 and $42 in crumpled bills. Not enough for a flight back to Chicago, barely enough for a night's stay somewhere. My credit cards? Tucked in Daniel's wallet. He'd insisted on carrying them earlier, claiming my purse was too full. "I've got it, babe," he'd said with that disarming smile I used to love. Now that smile felt like a trap. I found a cheap pensione above a butcher shop, its faded sign creaking in the breeze. The owner, a wiry man with a cigarette dangling from his lips, spoke no English but took my euros with a grunt, leading me to a room with a sagging bed and a cracked sink. I collapsed onto the mattress, staring at my phone. 32 calls to Daniel, all straight to voicemail. Texts delivered but unread. I tried Rick, then Tom, then Julian. Blocked. Every single one. A chill ran through me. This wasn't a spontaneous prank. It was planned, calculated. A public humiliation meant to break me. Sleep came in jagged pieces, interrupted by the buzz of my phone as I checked it obsessively, hoping for a crack in the silence. By morning, exhaustion had dulled the panic into a grim resolve. "He'll come back," I told myself over a stale croissant I'd bought with my dwindling funds. "He'll realize how insane this is and show up, tail between his legs." I spent the day wandering Monteverde, peering into every trattoria and hotel, searching for any sign of our tour group. By evening, the truth hit me like a punch. They'd moved on to Verona without me, sticking to the itinerary Daniel had meticulously planned. I was alone. On the third day, a barista at a corner coffee, a young woman with kind eyes, offered me a free cappuccino after noticing me hovering outside, too broke to buy anything. She pointed me toward the police station with halting English. "Polizia. Help." The officer there, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, listened to my story through a haze of cigarette smoke. He scribbled a report, shrugged, and handed me a carbon copy. "Tourists," he muttered in Italian, as if this were routine. I left with nothing but a useless piece of paper, and a sinking feeling that no one was coming for me. That afternoon I stood before a pawn shop, its window cluttered with tarnished jewelry and old radios. My fingers hesitated over my wedding ring, a 3-carat, emerald-cut diamond Daniel had given me on our 7th anniversary, replacing the simple gold band we'd started with. "Only the best for my wife," he'd said, beaming with pride. Now that ring felt like a shackle. The pawnbroker, a squat man with a greasy mustache, offered me €400, far less than it's worth, but enough to buy a bus ticket and a few days survival. "America? Call home," he suggested, counting out the euros. I nodded absently, but a different plan was taking shape. Home meant Chicago, meant facing my sister's smug "I told you so" about Daniel's temper, meant explaining to friends why I'd vanished, meant returning to a life where I'd shrunk myself to fit his shadow. No, I wasn't going back. The bus station was a concrete slab buzzing with flies, its flickering board listing destinations I'd only dreamed of: Rome, Naples, Bari. My finger hovered over my sister's name in my contacts. One call, and she'd wire money for a flight. One call and I'd slink back to the life Daniel had sculpted. The pristine condo, the charity galas, the role of the perfect wife who'd abandoned her photography career to manage his social calendar. A memory flickered, Daniel tossing my camera bag into a closet, laughing. "Why mess with that artsy stuff? We've got a good thing going." I'd smiled then, but now I saw it. Another bar in the cage he'd built around me. "Where you go?" the ticket agent asked, a grandmotherly woman with silver hair and a patient smile. I scanned the board, my eyes landing on Bari, Port City, a gateway to ferries to escape. "Bari," I said, the word tasting like freedom. "And then, wherever the ferry takes me." She nodded, handing me a ticket for an overnight bus. 14 hours later I stepped off in Bari, my body aching from the lurching seats, my purse lighter but my resolve heavy. The ferry terminal smelled of diesel and salt, its boards advertising routes to Greece, Corfu, Patras, Igoumenitsa. I chose Igoumenitsa, a name I couldn't pronounce but one that promised distance from Daniel's reach. The ferry rocked across the Ionian Sea, and as Italy faded behind me, a strange calm settled over my chest. I arrived in Igoumenitsa at dawn, the sky streaked with pink and orange. My phone died somewhere over the water, my euros dwindled to €120, and hunger gnawed at my ribs. I wandered from the port, my sandals meant for chic sightseeing, not survival, rubbing blisters into my feet. The road stretched into olive groves, their silver-green leaves shimmering like a mirage. Dehydration and exhaustion blurred my vy shown. And just as I registered the irony of collapsing in a second foreign country, my legs gave out. The ground met my face with a dull thud, and darkness crept in. "Calimera!" A sharp voice pierced the haze, followed by rough hands rolling me over. An older woman's face hovered above my leathery skin, dark eyes wide with worry. She spoke rapid Greek, pressing a canteen to my lips. The water jolted me awake, though my head spun like a top. "Maria," she said, tapping her chest. I mimicked her weakly. "Laura." She hauled me up, her wiry strength surprising for her small frame, and pointed to a stone cottage nestled among the trees. I nodded, too weak to resist, as she guided me up a dusty path. The cottage kitchen smelled of rosemary and simmering lentils. Maria sat me at a scarred wooden table, pouring water and ladling soup into a bowl. A man appeared in the doorway, tall, grizzled, with a salt and pepper beard, wiping his hands on a rag. "Dimitris," Maria said, gesturing to him. "Her husband." He studied me warily but offered a curt nod. I tried to explain, gesturing to my phone, my empty purse, my tear-streaked face, but words failed me. Maria nodded as if she understood, though I knew she couldn't. They offered me a spare room, a cot with a patched quilt, a window overlooking the groves. I collapsed into sleep, the weight of 3 days' chaos pulling me under. Morning brought roosters and the scent of fresh bread. A faded sundress and a pair of worn slippers waited at the foot of the bed. Maria's doing, I assumed. They hung loose on me, but they were clean, a relief after days in the same sweat-stained clothes. In the kitchen, Maria served coffee so strong it could wake the dead, paired with bread drizzled with olive oil and honey. Shame crept in as I sipped. Here I was, a stranger, fed and clothed by people who owed me nothing. I fumbled with my recharged phone, using a translation app to stammer out thanks and a promise to leave. Maria's face fell. She shook her head, pointing to the rain tapping the windows and my blistered feet. "Stay," she said, one of her few English words. "Rest." Over the next few days I tried to depart, grabbing my purse, lacing my sandals, only to be met with Maria's gentle insistence. Once she intercepted me at the door, her eyes so pained I felt like I'd betrayed her. She led me to a tin box on the mantel, pulling out faded photos. A young woman with Maria's cheekbones and Dimitri's quiet intensity stared back at me. "Eleni," Maria said, her voice soft. She pointed westward. Australia thin mimed, cradling a baby, her hand dropping to knee height. A granddaughter they'd never met. I understood. I was a stand-in, a balm for the absence of their daughter. Guilt softened into empathy. I hung my purse back on its hook. Life on the farm unfurled in rhythms I'd never known. Maria taught me to collect eggs, her hand steady as she showed me how to slip them from beneath clucking hens. Dimitri's pointed out weeds in the vegetable patch, chuckling when I yanked up a basil plant by mistake. The work was grueling. Me body, softened by yoga classes and ergonomic office chairs, screamed in protest. Calluses bloomed on my palms and muscles I'd forgotten ached each night. But with every task, the noise in my head, the endless loop of Daniel's laughter, my fear of the unknown quieted. For the first time in years I felt useful. 2 weeks in, Maria sat me down as we shucked beans from the garden. Her eyes searched mine before she asked haltingly, "Home? You go home." She mimed an airplane pointing west. The question cracked something open inside me. Home. The Chicago condo with its marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. Home. Daniel's voice dictating our dinner plans, our vacations, our life. Home. The woman I'd become, Laura the wife, not Laura the photographer, not Laura the dreamer. Tears spilled as I poured out my story in broken English. She couldn't fully grasp Daniel's betrayal, the slow erosion of my identity, the humiliation of that Italian street. Maria's hand found mine, warm and steady. She pointed to her heart, then the farm, then me. "You belong here," she seemed to say. "Work," I replied, mimicking Dimitri's raking olives. "I stay. I work." Her smile lit up the room, and we returned to the beans as if we'd just settled the weather, not my entire future. The next morning Maria woke me before dawn, handing me a pair of Eleni's old boots and a cotton shirt. We trudged to the groves, the sky still speckled with stars. "Eliona," she said, pointing to the olive-laden trees. She showed me how to rake the branches, olives raining onto nets below. My first attempts were clumsy, twigs and leaves fell more than fruit, but Dimitri's corrected me with a patience I hadn't expected from his gruff exterior. By noon my shoulders burned, my hands blistered. "Chicago hands," Maria teased, rubbing a minty salve into my palms. "Tomorrow better." She was right. Each day I grew stronger, my movements surer, my pride swelling with every basket we filled. The work didn't stop at harvest. We sorted olives under a VYNE-covered pergola, perfect ones for oil, blemished ones for curing, damaged ones for soap. Maria's sharp eyes caught my every mistake, nudging olives back into their proper piles. "You learn quick," Dimitri said one evening, his English rough but warm. It was the first praise I'd earned in years, and it lodged in my chest like an ember. In Maria's kitchen I floundered me cooking skills, honed on Pinterest recipes for Daniel's clients, useless without timers and nonstick pans. She taught me to knead dough by feel, to season by instinct. My first loaves were disasters, lumpy, burnt, but Maria tore them apart, tasting each one. "Learning is not waste," she said, and I began to believe her. My body changed with the labor and the food, simple, earthy meals of garden vegetables, fresh eggs, goat cheese from the neighbor's herd. The designer jeans I'd arrived in hung loose, replaced by muscle earned through sweat. My skin, once pampered with serums, glowed from sun and olive oil soap. One morning I caught my reflection in a cracked mirror. Tanned, lean, alive. I barely recognized myself and I liked it. 3 months in, Maria and Dimitri's led me to their oil pressing shed. Its stone walls lined with bottles of golden liquid. "Market day," Maria announced, pointing to the calendar. The VY Lodge Square buzzed with stalls, farmers hawking tomatoes, artisans peddling pottery. They set up a table, arranging oil, soap, and jars of cured olives, then pushed me forward to deal with customers. My Greek was halting, their English spotty, but we muddled through with smiles and gestures. By day's end, Maria pressed an envelope into my hand. €50 my share. Fair work, fair pay, she said. I slipped it under my pillow that night, touching it to remind myself it was real. In Chicago, Daniel had controlled our money, his salary as a tech VP dwarfing my sporadic freelance gigs. His credit cards doled out like allowances. This was mine, earned untethered. A week later, they took me to the VY Lodge Tavern, a rare outing. Dressed in Maria's embroidered blouse, I felt like an imposter among the locals' easy chatter. The owner, Costas, greeted Maria and Dimitris with bear hugs, then turned to me with a grin. "Our American," Maria said proudly in Greek. "Over octopus and Retsina." Dimitris cleared his throat. "Laura, we talk business." My stomach dropped. Had I overstayed? Maria squeezed my hand. "We old," she said, gesturing between them. 72. Eleni not come back. We retire soon, 2 years, maybe 3. Trees need young hands. Dimitris nodded. "You learn fast. We teach all. Then business yours." I stared dumbfounded. Me, a city girl inheriting an olive farm? "I don't know enough," I protested. "You learn," Dimitri said firmly. "No rush." From that night, I was no longer a helper but a student. Dimitris walked me through the groves, explaining soil quirks and pest signs. Maria showed me their ledger's messy scribbles I turned into spreadsheets, revealing which oils sold best. I designed new labels, wrote a pamphlet about their methods, and watched sales climb. The VY Lodge embraced me. Costas featured our oil at his tables. The baker's wife dragged me to coffee clutches. The priest blessed me at a christening. I wove myself into their world, thread by thread. 6 months in, a conversation with Sophia, a weaver at the market, shifted everything. "You never talk America," she said, her English crisp from years in London. "Family? Friends?" I faltered. "Parents gone. Friends faded. Daniel, me husband, pushed them away." She tilted her head. "He never looked for you?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I stopped checking." She arched a brow. "Maybe time to look. Not for him, for you." To shut the door. That night I powered up my old phone, hands trembling as I logged into my email. Hundreds of messages, friends' worried notes. A job offer from my old photography professor for a remote gig with a travel magazine. Then one from Daniel sent that morning. "Laura, I hired a PI. Found you in that Greek nowhere. Enough games, I'm bringing you home. Flight lands in Athens Saturday. Be ready. 3 days away." Panic clawed my throat, but anger burned hotter. He thought he could reclaim me like a lost sock? I showed Maria the email, my voice shaking. She slid an envelope across the table. "Partnership papers. My name beside theirs, signed that week." "Now," she said, tapping them. "Not future. You choose what happens Saturday. This your home, your business, your people." I VY cited the VY Lodge lawyer, drafting divorce papers. I emailed my professor accepting the job. I wrote to friends, owning my disappearance without groveling. Saturday dawned bright. I was bottling oil with Dimitris when a car engine growled outside. Maria met my eyes. "He here." Daniel stepped from a BMW, sunglasses gleaming, his linen shirt screaming money. He scanned the farm with a sneer, not seeing me at first. "Daniel," I called, stepping forward in my dusty boots. His jaw dropped. Me tan, my strength, my calm annoying him. "Jesus, Laura, what's happened to you?" he said, his tone dripping with judgment. "Life," I replied, crossing my arms. "What are you doing here?" He flashed his old charm. "Taking you home, babe. This has gone on too long." "This isn't a tantrum," I said, stepping back. "It's a life." He bristled as Maria and Dimitris flanked me. "These people brainwashing you," he snapped. "They've taught me," I shot back. "I'm part owner, Haria business, a purpose." He laughed, cruel and sharp. "You a farmer? This some midlife crisis? I'm sorry I left you in Italy, stupid move. Let's go home." "Why now?" I pressed. He shifted. "People talk, clients, your sister. It looks bad." "Your image," I said flatly. "Not our life, yours." I handed him the divorce papers, the partnership agreement glowing in my pocket. "I'm not your accessory anymore. I'm staying." His face twisted shock, rage, defeat. "You'll regret this," he spat, clutching the envelope as he stormed to his car. Dimitris muttered in Greek. "Road's tricky at night. Go now." Daniel drove off, dust swirling in his wake. Maria took my hand, and we turned back to the house. Daniel had meant to break me, but he'd handed me the key to a freedom I'd never dared imagine.